Now, I'm just going to refer briefly back to the conversation we had on this very stage last year, and I don't know how many of you were in the room for that, but it was a wonderful conversation which really touched on this idea about how adequate housing and the right to housing is really human rights in practice. And this year, as we all know, we've been talking about for the last couple of days, Saudi is opening up hugely, and that global spotlight is really going to be on the kingdom with events like Expo 2030 and obviously with the FIFA World Cup in 2034 and a bigger push on tourism and investment. So there's a huge amount going on, which means that I think there's going to be eyes on the country. So today what I'd love to do is develop our conversation a little bit further from last year and look a bit more about what that responsible growth can look like here on the ground and how doing that with a human rights lens will enable the communities and cities that everyone in this room is helping to build can, help them to thrive. So what I'd love to start off by doing, and it's quite a big question, but you've got some incredible insights about this topic. When you think about human rights in Saudi today, how do you hold that balance between international standards and also the key Islamic values upon which the kingdom is founded in a way that really feels clear and maintains consistency?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you again for having me for the second time in this very important event. Well, let me start with the global context.
Yeah.
Last year's slogan to the International Human Rights Day was Everyday Essentials. So this actually is a very important focus on what we call in the language of human rights is the right to development.
Yes.
Because it means that your daily essentials are human rights. And this pretty much adheres to what we were discussing last year here. And also what we have been promoting in Saudi Arabia in general is that you have to look at the issue of human rights from a holistic, comprehensive approach. You cannot just take one of these rights and focus on it and claim that you are promoting or strengthening human rights. And this is exactly what the Saudi Vision 2030 is all about. Yes. Because if you look at all the vision programs, they focus on everyday essentials. And this particular topic, the real estate, the right to housing, the right to an adequate standard of life, is basically this.
Well, everything's underpinned by real estate, whether it's healthcare, housing, sanitation, facilities, infrastructure, education. It all comes back to real estate, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it is a fundamental right, we call it, because if you think about it, having a house is basic to everything else, to financial stability, to family progress, to having a family in the first place, and then to the prosperity, job security, social security, all of that. It all starts from the foundation, which is having a decent housing. Yes. And that's why, going back from this global context, we've always found so many correlations between our Islamic Saudi values and the international standards. For many people who don't know really Islamic values, they think there's a contradiction. But when we dig deep into each and every aspect of the Islamic values and the Islamic Sharia, we realize that there are more similarities than actually contradictions between those. And that's why Saudi Arabia was among the countries that actually signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yes. That was in 1945. None of us were born, but that...
I mean, speak for yourself. I'm definitely feeling it these days.
But I mean, if there was a contradiction, then probably Saudi Arabia wouldn't be part of it. On the contrary, there is a lot of emphasis on these rights as being rooted in our lives. And I welcome everybody to visit the Saudi Human Rights Commission, because we have a mini exhibition where we actually showcase the stages of, the progression of the topic of human rights, from the beginning of Islam and the what we call the Medina Charter, down to today and the conventions that we've ratified and the commitments that we have translated into initiatives like the one we're talking about here today.
I mean, that's an incredible foundation to have, and it's so good that, as you say, things are aligned. You're not battling against contradictions, which I think would make your job a lot harder. So if that's our foundation, let's perhaps talk about how the work of government can help make that real and can help bring that to life for the citizens and the residents of the kingdom. So obviously this is where you sit, Your Excellency, but what role do the government bodies really play in advising on human rights issues and also helping the different sectors to stay aligned with those international standards, particularly, for example, the real estate sector that we're focusing on today?
Yeah. So I think the formula applies to all, the real estate and other sectors, health, education, is that, first of all, the government has to have a legal structure, and then develop mechanisms or tools to make sure that the legislation is actually implemented through these tools, and then to monitor, which is compliance.
Absolutely.
And then also to have grievance mechanisms or channels by which people can or through which people can complain and all of that. So in the case of real estate, this is exactly the situation. So we have the ministry, which is responsible for the strategies and the legislation, and then we have the real estate authority, which is the regulatory body that's responsible for the tools and mechanisms. And then we have the bodies that overlook compliance, and we're one of them. The Commission is located in a unique place in the structure of governance in the government, because we report directly to the king and we overlook compliance with human rights standards across all sectors, including real estate.
Amazing.
And therefore, we are also among the bodies that receive complaints from individuals, companies, and others, and therefore we follow these complaints, make sure that there are no violations of people's rights and all of that. So that's the formula.
Yes.
But if you look at what that has accomplished in the kingdom, in the real estate sector, you see that this has produced great progress. We're talking about, for example, more than, if I get the numbers right, so more than 100,000 families got houses only in 2024 in Saudi Arabia.
That's extraordinary.
That's not houses, but housing cost assistance, I'm sorry. Women, in 2018, only 5% of women benefited from the housing supporting programs. In 2023, this percentage has raised to 36%. So from 5 to 36%. I don't have the recent statistics after 23, but looking at how women are progressing, I'm sure this also has increased. So, and also developmental housing programs delivered 87,000 units targeting elderly citizens, people in vulnerable situations, people with disability, and all of that. So these are numbers that actually support the notion that this formula is actually working. Absolutely. And it is granting those people their right to housing on the one hand, and it's also securing, the entire community, because again, going back to housing, it is the main reason why we have community cohesion, family stability, and prosperity for the youth.
And would you say there's still an appetite for increased learning and improvement? Do you feel like that's something that's very much embedded in the mindset to continue moving in that direction, that positive direction?
Definitely. There's always room for more. And I think from my personal experience, my second daughter is studying architectural engineering and design. For me, that was not possible, not only to study it, but even to think of a woman as working as an architectural design. But every night she comes to me and shows me her designs and her aspiration to take part in developing, the new concepts to the structures and houses and the kingdom. That's just an example I'm living with every day, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure that the potential of the young generation is much, much, much bigger than we know.
I mean, to see that evidence of change and improvement, just as you say, within that generation, within just the sense of your daughter being able to do something that you wouldn't even have considered. No. And there might be some architectural firms in the room who would be interested in a bright young graduate in a couple of years. So let's talk a bit about how we have to integrate the whole ecosystem in delivering these changes and upholding these standards, because obviously the government and compliance can't do it alone. So what does that strong collaboration really look like when it comes to protecting and promoting human rights? We have to think about the private sector, we have to think about civil society, and obviously the role of the government. Can you talk to us a little bit about collaboration?
I think the issue of human rights is actually a responsibility for all. And this is exactly what we've been promoting, and this is how we've been working with, whether it's line ministries or the private sector or the non-profit organizations in general in their different levels. So without that collaboration, I think we cannot move forward. And this is exactly the kind of framework that we've been promoting recently. So, for example, the private sector is a great provider of many of the services that we see today, including the development of real estate, the development also of communities and houses. The transformation you see today, for example, is that not only do we see houses, but we also see parks, sidewalks.
Yes.
You see cities that are livable in the sense that people can walk, people can exercise, ride bikes and scooters. This is not just about infrastructure. This is also about environment, about health, about communication, all of that. You see that this shift is actually affecting the society in that way. For the non-profit, they actually perform great when it comes to reaching out to people in different cities, in people in vulnerable situations, because neither the government nor the private sector can reach these communities. And this is what's the main cause behind reaching more than 87,000 families and providing them with housing assistance. Without the assistance of the private sector, nobody could reach and know about these families. So again, the government is responsible for the legal, legislative part, but again, it's a whole ecosystem that has to work together to be able to deliver these initiatives. And this is the key to Saudi Vision 2030, because it created that kind of formula where if agencies don't work together, really work together, nobody could reach their goals. So that's why you see ministries supporting each other,
yes.
The private sector pinching in, and so on, the non-profit. Otherwise, nobody can accomplish. And I think that new trend in working and collaboration is what making the impossible possible when it comes to big projects like the one we're talking about.
I mean, it's absolutely true, and we've talked a lot about collaboration, and also you are definitely speaking the language of the RFF with the ideas of livability, the idea of social capital and social impact as a value driver within people's environments, within cities. And I think that it's wonderful that, in a sense, the human rights principles are driving some of those decisions as well, in terms of people don't just want bricks and mortars for homes, they want to feel a sense of belonging, they want to feel a sense of purpose, they want to feel a sense of connection. And those are sort of basic human rights really too, aren't they?
Yeah, everyday essentials.
Yeah, the everyday essentials, exactly. And we're seeing that come to life in the project in
yes.
the room, which I think is absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
Would you have a sort of slightly within this topic, but a little bit off topic, but to the developers in the room, to enable those everyday essentials, is there a core principle that everybody should be aligning with when it comes to thinking about their projects? They're going to build something, they're going to create something. What should they have in mind that enables that to be completely compliant with a core human rights principle?
Well, there are general standards about everyday essentials and human rights, and they are clearly explained in the 28 articles of the Declaration, which and also the SDGs, specifically SDG 11, because livable cities are they have structures and standards. So these are written everywhere. But for us in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we also have to appreciate our culture. Yes. And that's why we also have developed the code of building. I know many developers find that to be kind of restricting to what they're doing, but actually it is very meaningful to have a city that looks like us, that looks like our cultures, looks like how our houses were used to build. I mean, if you walk into one of in London or Rome, it resembles who they are. Exactly. And that's exactly the reason why this code. So development that also connects the city to its roots, I think, is also very essential. Might not be a purely human rights aspect, but again, if we look at what we started our conversation with, is that we look at these global concepts, but we also found ourselves and our heritage in them. When we look at human rights, yes, we talk about 28 articles, right to health, right to education, but also we go back to who we are. Absolutely. And where do we stand from these? Absolutely. And the same thing applies to developing our cities, building our houses, our communities. This also has to have an aspect of who we are and our culture.
I think, again, I mean, you say it's not necessarily human rights, but it is totally human. And that idea about identity and roots and legacy and, not just building in a way that eliminates all of the things that makes the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I think that's a hugely important principle. So let's continue on this theme and really what the forum is all about, which is housing and development, as we know. And you've mentioned previously this idea about vulnerable groups and supporting the elderly, supporting maybe people who don't have as much economic privilege. How do you do that, but while still supporting sustainable development? Because I imagine it's a bit of a juggling act.
Not really, because as I said, if you have a robust structure, then that definitely will address all types of needs. But when it comes to initiatives like real estate or housing support systems, this also goes hand in hand with other initiatives like the social security, the poverty prevention, and all of that. So it's, again, a complete structure that we've developed. But because of some, bureaucracy before, for example, people used to wait for 15 years to get a housing loan. Today, according to the recent statistics, the answer is immediate. So there's a huge shift from waiting for 15 years to get an approval to getting it immediately. And also women were excluded because generally it's the man who provides the house. But now with the new movements in the society and the changes, there are women who are the bread providers in the family. And therefore, this exclusion of women doesn't work. And that explains the rise in women benefiting from these. But again, the general approach is all of these initiatives are actually starting with the people who are mostly in need, and then going up in the structure of the society, and not the other way around.
Absolutely.
So,
and where are those biggest needs right now that you see? Because it would be interesting for the people in the room to maybe have that in mind when they're thinking about their projects. Where are the biggest needs in vulnerable groups?
So they're not located in specific areas, and I think this is very important, because this is a mistake that many countries did, is that to put people of similar social status in one place. Unfortunately, that resulted in the cycle of poverty that keeps going around, and the increase in crime rates and all of that. So it's not healthy to have people structured that way in a city and make the city look like it has hierarchy. But actually to have people of different social incomes mixed together in different. And that's why in the recent initiatives that His Royal Highness followed himself, and we're very proud also to be following, the new areas that were granted with lower prices are also among the areas that are the highest in price. So this tells you that the issue is also to mix the communities together. But again, the situation is different in other areas. The rural areas also full of potential on all aspects. Real estate is one of them, but it's also full of potential on all aspects. And the growth in these cities outside the big cities is also, I think, very important to look at.
And I think there are some amazing lessons that the global community can take away from what you're doing and how you are building and serving the needs of those vulnerable communities here in KSA. It's very inspiring to talk about integration and trying to prevent and break that cycle of generational poverty and things like that. But let's just move on a little bit and talk about accountability, because it's all well and good to have systems and standards, but if they're not being upheld, or if there isn't any accountability or consequence, then they're only as good as the paper they're written on. So when a violation does happen, and you've mentioned complaints and the fact that you handle some of those and there are other departments that do, but what does accountability look like? How do you ensure justice and even perhaps remedy if there are victims of injustice?
Well, first of all, as I said, you have to have a very solid system, starting from the judiciary and making sure that all people have equal access to it, and then to grievance mechanisms. So, yes, we do receive complaints, but we also oversight if companies also have grievance mechanisms, because workers or clients need to have a first access point where they can complain to the company or to others about the company. So that first level of access to grievance is actually very important. Then we come. So we actually come to guarantee that all of these mechanisms are working. So if we receive a complaint, for example, about a case of domestic violence, first thing we check is that the entities responsible for domestic violence have actually responded to this call, have actually done their due diligence and all of that. And then we start to see what is the case and why is this case still not resolved whatsoever. And then we go through many levels of escalation until we reach the level of writing directly to the royal court about it. But before that, we have to check that there's compliance with the mechanisms in the first place. Same thing applies to real estate. You have, as I said, the real estate authority. It has that function as well, because it is the regulatory body. What we receive usually in cases of housing is, individual complaints about agencies not responding or delayed response, or people who, for example, have been denied the support and they believe they need it. Here we inspect and see that there is no violence of their rights. And most of the cases are actually resolved at the first stage, where we actually follow it up with the entity responsible, and then things progress. But there are many cases where we actually escalated the issue, and because we've identified, for example, a gap in the system, or a gap even in the law itself. And many of these recommendations that we've given to the government have actually been translated into amendments of the laws and regulations.
Amazing. I mean, it's great to hear that there are these super robust systems in place. I imagine it's a bit of an awareness question as to how people can meet that process if they need to, how they find the right support. But I imagine that that's something that you're continually working on to make sure that everybody is aware of their rights and how to maintain the rights of their sovereign humanity.
Definitely, and we're using all the channels available, including digital channels, and also we have branches in all 13 regions. So there's always an office that people can knock on its door and come and complain. In addition, of course, to the digital, as I said, channels. But that is not an easy task, because raising awareness takes time, and you're not just raising awareness, you're also creating a culture of people who know their rights. We have so much belief in the young generation, and we've worked very closely with the Ministry of Education through channels by which we can reach those individuals. But that work has to be continuous and does not stop. And again, with a country that's growing so fast, with people coming to work from different parts of the world, not all of them speaking, Arabic or English, awareness raising among also people who come to work here on how to report, whom to call, what to do if you are faced with, any incident or a person violating your right. Is also an issue, and we're working also with embassies and countries that send workers here to help us raise awareness. So it's not an easy task, but we're on it, inshallah.
If it were an easy task, then everyone would be doing it, right? But let's just conclude our conversation with that sort of global point in mind, because I love the fact that you talk about Saudi Arabia being attractive to workers from other countries, residents, and obviously with the new non-Saudi ownership law, then we are going to attract yet more people into the kingdom with the spotlight. I think that's going to create a lot of awareness and attention on the country. If there is one thing you would want to say, because we do have a very global audience here, to help close that gap perhaps between perception and reality, is there something that you would want everybody to take away as a message when it comes to the way that Saudi Arabia has these robust systems in place, is upholding human rights, is aligned to the international principles, and also maintaining its unique Islamic heart? Is there something you'd like to share to finish?
Yes, probably I'll start with the new decision for non-Saudis to own property in Saudi Arabia. And I think this is a very strong message on a culture that is not just opening up, but actually is more welcoming for others. Because again, going back to what is a house, it's making the place your home. So with that decision, I think what the message my country is sending out is that we want you to feel Saudi Arabia as your home, so that you own property, you think of it as a place that you want to stay in. And actually, I've personally touched that with many families, foreign families who live here in Saudi Arabia, and how much they like living here. They talk about the safety, the security. Women, my female friends, talk about how they can walk in the streets 2 a.m., although I don't know what they're doing 2 a.m.
I'm going to be in bed at 2 a.m. I don't know about you.
But I mean, you want that to be, you know, topped with them also owning property and feeling that they belong. That decision, I think, is not just, you know, random or it's just for investment purposes. It also sends a very strong message about how this country is very much respectful to other people's rights and also welcoming for everybody.
Respectful to human rights, welcoming to everybody, wanting us to make it a real home, and it definitely does feel like home every time I come.
I'm glad.
Dr. Al-Tuwaijri, it is an honor to have you with us on this stage. Your voice is such an important one in the kingdom.
Honor is mine.
Thank you for sharing with us. Please, can we have a huge round of applause for Dr. Hala Al-Tuwaijri?